Here we go. Hi. Um, I will be talking to you guys about conversational learning or instructional learning, or another way to call it is mentor learning. Um, I use this often in my honors class and my small class. Um, Honestly, it's just having a conversation. And that's why I titled this Let's Have a Conversation. It falls under the category of teaching and learning in the LEAP framework. So come with me. Let's have a conversation. According to Ghent University, conversational learning is pretty much a conversation where you, as the lecturer, the teacher, leads the students in particular insights to problem solve. Um, Typically in the US, we use this in elementary school when learning new words with vocabulary, when trying to problem solve with, like, if Matthew has 12 apples, Dana has 7, 6, let's say Dana has 6, how many apples does Dana have, half or not, type of thing. So we use it for word problems and wordplay. I teach history, so I use it more of the understanding that students understand concepts. So while I have been teaching government or history or New Mexico history on top of that, I'm using this more as I'm front loading them with all this information and lecturing them and giving them this lecture about, how whether we're a three ring circus as a nation, we have the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. And so as I'm telling them this, I'm asking them questions as a group, as a whole, as a class. I'm asking them these questions of, hey, what do you think judicial means? Hey, why are we legislative? What does that mean? What is an executor? What do we mean when we say executive? Are they the highest person? Are they not the highest person? Who has the most power? But I'm doing it in a way to make sure my students have that conversation with me or with each other. That way I know that if this one person, if student A doesn't understand but student B does, while they're talking and while they're listening to other people around the room talk, they can talk to each other also and be like, student B could be like, hey, legislation means that they make the laws. They're the people who enforce the laws. They get to declare war. Cool. And so student A would be like, oh, I understand now. Leg, law, type thing. Executive, you are the head. Who's the head of the country? President. So it's just ways of having these questions as I'm lecturing to the students. And as we get into this, you'll understand a little bit more of what I mean. So Ghent University says it's just a way as we as lecturers can assess what we're going on and students can build arguments. When I was in the museum field, I use this a lot when giving guided tours just to see what people were understanding and to cause discourse, actual, like, real discourse, to see if I can start an argument between people. Now that I teach 7th grade, I don't think I actually want to do it to start an argument. I want to see if they can actually have evidence on their argument. So I got this image off Google Images and it works perfectly. So I typically start with the red on top, that big essential question. So let's go back to talking about legislative, judicial, and executive branch. Why do we have a 3-ring circus in our government, right? So why, that is our giant essential question. That is our idea. Why do you need all 3 for the government? Okay. Links to background knowledge. What do you know? If you are one of my 7th graders, what do you know? How much do you know? Who makes the laws? Well, I just told you earlier, but did you know that before? Did you know that technically the police department falls under the president, not the legislative branch or judicial branch? Did you know, like, what do you know? How do I link it to your background knowledge? Well, I try to use some of the stuff on the inside. So maybe I adapt things into students' interests, talk about maybe a video game. Watch Dogs or Assassin's Creed here. I can talk about how, there's the head of the creed in Assassin's Creed, or in Watch Dogs, there's head of Watch Dogs. Or even then, If you play Destiny, there's the head of the Destiny, the head of the towers, which was Zavala, Cade, and Ikora. So they would be your different branches, right? Okay, cool. So that's kind of how I'd pique your interest. Then I go down to the direct instruction, which is me lecturing to you. Okay, so it's me telling you judicial is the Supreme Court. They're the guys who make sure that the laws are being carried to how they should be. Legislative is the ones who make the laws. They get to declare war. They get to tell you, hey, you're right, wrong. You're right, there needs to be better ways to fix the roads. You're wrong, this needs to happen type things. Then you have the executive branch, which is the president, and he's the guy who's in control of, well, the military, the president, you know. So we talk about it, and then I have those open-ended questions there between the orange and the invitations to extend. That's my open-ended questions. Why does the legislative branch get to declare war? Why not the president? Constitution doesn't really say. So why do you think so? Do we need all three branches? In your words, explain to me why we need all three branches. Name me a superhero who would fit in all three branches. I do that to keep their interest with it. So then invitation to extend their knowledge, right? So extending their knowledge is like, hey, had we been studying government back in January, actually, what the State of Union just happened here in March or February, had we been studying government when the State of the Union happened, with my honors kids especially, I would have them read it and figure out where the branches fall into what the president would have said for the State of the Union. Did he have the right to say certain things in the Union that he didn't have the right? Things like that. But since it didn't happen when we were studying it, I had them use newspapers. They had to find newspaper articles for each branch, whether it was police reports or a article about the governor of New Mexico, or, you know, education, because education falls under legislation. So anything like that. And then that's where that use the evidence to support their point of view. When they're discussing, when they're talking in these questions, they have to state evidence. So think of a close read. After you read it so many times, you have to state, like, in paragraph 2, sentence 7, this was said. And then that leads you back into your big idea, because you have all of that. But think of it now instead of on paper. So instead of it being on paper and kids having to write it on paper and read it on paper, it's all in a conversation. There'd be like, I have 20 kids in my honors class, and so it's all of us kind of sitting around each other, or me just walking around the room asking these questions. Kids are raising their hands, they're talking to each other. It's organized chaos. So if you don't like a loud classroom most of the time, this is not the type of thing for you, I will tell you that. But as a teacher, I'm able to see, okay, this person's understanding get better. Okay, I don't have to worry about them as much. I need to sit down with this one and see if they want to tutor later. It's actually kind of interesting. So what does it look like? It looks like it's a student-centered phenomenon. Okay. Oh, sorry. It looks like a student-centered phenomenon. I ask the question, the conversation goes off from there. Student engagement. Not all the time does this work in my honors class or in my class of 16. It does not always work. Let me put it that way. Sometimes they are very engaged, very driven, very going. Sometimes it is just like frustration because they don't want to answer the question. They just sit there and look at you. That's when you're like, all right, pull out your notes. You can look through your notes. You probably know it as a think, pair, share in the easiest sense, or a turn and talk, where instead of the whole classroom is learning from each other, it is literally just like 1 or 2 kids learning from each other. Maybe if you have them in groups of 4, you have them talking with their group partners. That's fine. If that's how you can handle it, where it's either 2 or 4, all power to you, because I've seen this in the college setting. I've seen this outside of school settings. I believe conversational instruction or instructional conversations have a place in our society today, because honestly, it feels like it lets the students know that you care. Um, on another note, for your honors kids or your AP students here in secondary, Socratic seminars and philosophical chairs. The best way to describe instructional conversation are those two things, because you as a teacher, maybe the day or two ahead of time, you're front loading all the information, you're making sure it's all in there. Then that day, you just kind of like, "Here's the question," and they take it and they run with it, and I have yet to see a Socratic seminar, at least with my honors kids, fail. My favorite one that we did was all about the national anthem, and should we still have it? What does it mean to them? What does it mean to their parents, or what do they think it means to their parents? Is it a form of brainwash? Like, the conversations were all on topic, but it went from, like, what is the national anthem to, is it brainwashing? Is it religious? It was amazing to watch the kids and watch how their brains worked, and I had all of them except for one participate, and that one student just never really wants to participate. So other little nuggets to think about whenever it comes to conversational instruction is it's a wheezy, sorry. It's an easy way to assess the knowledge of our students. So again, like I do, I have them sit in groups and I walk around, but it doesn't work in my classes of 35 or more, or 30 or more. Let me put it actually 20 or more. The 20 or more are harder to understand. Everyone's talking over each other, so I do it with 20 or less. Um, but I'm walking around and I'm able to be involved in all conversations. And you see hands shoot up and they're like, "Hey, Miss K, we don't understand this." Or you see students go, "Nuh-uh, I'm gonna go get the textbook and see if that's really what it talks about," or "I'm gonna Google that." It is ways for them to learn from each other, and it is amazing. Um, it supports academic language and builds professional vocabulary for the future. Again, with my avid students and my honor students and my small class, when we do conversational instructions, which is almost like once a week now, it is a way for them to learn how to start presenting themselves to their bosses when they're older. Um, they're no longer using street slang. We're like half almost to the end of the school year, have 2 months left, but they're no longer using slang in their conversation. It's actually like real academic words. Um, again,